board to determine the direction we're moving forward with our vacant seat.
At this time, I would like to make a motion to accept Mariah Munoz as our position number 2 board director.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
We will, motion made, and I have a second. Bear with me, this is my first time. At this time, we will do a roll call. Azaro?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Ken?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Welcome to the school board. Because we already started this meeting and we can't make an adjustment to the agenda, we won't be able to swear you in until the next board meeting, but we're super happy to have you, so thank you for joining us. Yes.
Thank you.
Where's Talia? We need to get the photo.
I know.
We'll get one next week when we or
Yeah, we'll get
We'll
one
swear
next
you
week
in.
when we swear you in. Okay, at this time, we're gonna throw it over to our student reps.
Okay. First of all, baseball, Final Four for state.
Woo!
Woo! I'm actually super proud of them. Xavier Lascon actually was one of the pitchers for that last game, and he did really well. It wasn't Xavier? No, who was it?
It was Aiden.
Aiden, yeah, sorry. Yeah,
There was a
sorry.
bunch.
But they clutched up. It was really good. And soccer went into the first round of state. They got put out, but they had a really good season overall. Jose Cabrera, he was going crazy. Like the whole season, he did really well. What's the other else? We're coming up to track. We have 2 girls, Abby and Bella, going to state. They also made first team too, so that was pretty cool. Boys, we got put on everything. Like the Ellensburg kids are like 15 times our size. So they're so fast, so fast. But it was really fun though. Our season closing. We got field day coming up as well. Oh yes, soccer. They're gonna have their. No, they're finished.
Yeah.
Golf as well. How did golf do? I know some of
I
us
think
have-
Samson got 10th.
Yes, 10th. There you go. So yeah, we've done pretty good. Athletics are kind of closing. Spring is also the time when the kids are scratching by. So we're just trying to make it.
3 more weeks.
3 weeks. They said that like 5 weeks ago. Yeah, that's all for us.
Great, thank you. We will move on to board member discussions, starting with our legislative report by Director Gerber.
Nothing for legislative report today.
Okay. I don't have anything else for board member discussions unless anyone has anything to add to that.
I
We'll
think we
move-
just
okay.
want to confirm about graduation attendance. We want to make sure we include it appropriately in the program. So I think it's going to be Azaro, Lindsay, and Aaron for sure. And Ken, you were not available.
I'm not available.
Not available. Mariah, do you think you'd be available for graduation on the 6th? Okay. We'll make an adjustment to the program, even though it might be prior to the official swearing in. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I will accept a motion to approve required approvals.
I'll make a motion to approve required approvals.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. At this time, we'll move on to our superintendent informational items and throw it over to Dr. Perez.
Yeah, thank you. As I was listening to the soon-to-be Director Munoz talk about some of the biggest things facing the district and the challenges that we're having to deal with, I think all of you may have shared that standards-based grading would be one that we've been talking about for a couple of years now. And so we committed to the board to share with you some next steps and provide a follow-up by the end of the school year. And today's that opportunity to share with you some work that we've done over the last several weeks. It's been primarily myself, Dr. Meek, and John Wiseman out gathering information about next steps, and certainly with a lot of help from the administrators at Othello High School and McFarland Middle School. This is some of the work we've been doing. We had focus groups in mid-April. We took what we learned in those focus groups at Othello High School, and then met with the Othello High School administrative team to talk to them about what we heard and whether or not it lined up with what they believed about how things were going. We presented to the board in April, end of April, and shared with you that we'd be coming back before the end of the year, and that's what today's about. We got a group of focus teachers to compare Skyward to Empower. I know that you are all very savvy about the challenges we've faced with, this is an SBG presentation, but many of the concerns shared by parents and by students has really been Empower versus Skyward. So we had a test run and a chance to evaluate those, and I'll share some data with you about that. Dr. Meek and John Wiseman then met with some McFarland focus group teachers on May 14th, a similar activity that we ran in April at the high school. Then we went back to Othello High School on the 20th to provide an update similar to the one that you're going to hear today, with maybe just a little less detail for you. And then we're here today providing the board update. You'll remember this work was really focused on, we're really talking about level 4 here, standards reference reporting, and that's an optional component of this idea about high reliability schools and making sure that every kid has effective teaching in their classroom, they feel connected to the school, and that the experiences they're having in 9th grade algebra in one class are very similar to the ones that they have in another class. So chasing a really good target, and it's a matter of how we provide feedback to our parents and to our kids about how they're doing. Now this slide, if you'll remember, we gave the high school and the middle school some options to consider, and we asked them for some of their qualitative data, like, how do you really feel about this? What's your story? What do you think about this? And then we actually gathered some votes and took some numbers, and we did a quantitative report here. And so about 40% of teachers said, just keep going. And this is combined between McFarland and the high school. Stay within power. We've put a lot of time and energy into this. Stay the course. And we had a smaller percentage, about 15%, say, hey, we need to take a breather on this. We're hearing a lot of concerns about Empower in particular. Let's charge ahead the way we've indicated, but let's pull back on Empower. And then we had a larger group, just over 40%, say, hey, we need to have some options, some choice and some flexibility here. Maybe not every course lines up to be used for standards-based grading. Maybe it's not used 100% across the school in every class. Let's take a more thoughtful approach to it. And when you combine those two at the end, it's just over 60% who say, maybe we should move away from Empower. And I'm going to share with you where we're headed. I did share with the high school staff, and if you put this data just in high school teachers, the green bar would be 25, the purple one would be 25, and the red one would be 50. And when you look at it as a percentage, there are certainly at least twice, maybe over that, twice the teachers at Othello High School as compared to McFarland, and certainly a more complicated master schedule that exists at the secondary level. So some additional, I think, influence has to be and weight given to the high school perspective on this particular issue, if we decide that we're going to do it as a 7-12 model. The next slide shares with you some of the comparisons we ran, pros and cons of Empower versus Skyward. And if you look on the far right, there's the boxes there. If it's an N, that means it's neutral. Doesn't really matter which platform that you use. An E would give the nod to Empower. Hey, Empower is maybe a better model. And so we evaluated these with teachers who are skilled in Empower and have been using it for a couple of years. And then we cloned their classes. Dr. Meek was able to do the technical parts of that and show them their classes in Skyward live in the moment and let them know kind of what it would mean. A couple of these that maybe have been important to the board. You've probably heard from parents about, well, I'm not sure where my kid's at. There's this line, and I'm not sure what the grade actually is. I think we've heard that a little bit from our student reps as well. And so there's been some challenges in communicating with families really clearly. The next page indicates that the places where the group that we were meeting with thought Skyward got the nod, and when it was a little bit easier to navigate. So that first one is really important. If we make this switch to Skyward for traditional and standards-based grading, parents only log into one system. They're not chasing two systems now. It's one login. Also in Skyward, a standards-based grading course will also appear with a traditional grade. So you might be a 3.0 in a class, and it'll appear as an A on as your parents look in and you navigate, how am I doing in class? Grade entry for teachers, so from the teacher side, very similar to how you already use Skyward, and so that won't be a heavy new learning for staff. Creates better trend lines, and then the one at the bottom around athletic eligibility, it's been a difficult challenge to make sure who's on track, who's not on track, who's eligible, who's not, and switching to Skyward will clean that up. So on the next slide, I'm going to let you see some of the next steps that we are going to pursue at both Othello High School and McFarland Middle School. We heard a lot at the board level. I know that some of you have shared concerns with your own children who are students in our school district. You've heard it from some teachers. We heard it on our in our focus groups, changing the late work from a 4-week minimum to a 2-week minimum. And so you can see Miles down there nodding his head, and I'm not sure what the reaction is down there. Let me stop there for a second. What do you think about that move, students?
I need it, or else I won't do my work. Seriously, I will not do it. I will wait until 3 weeks and 6 days and do it. No, because the first week my mom is, and then she's, oh, I'll take care of it, And then the next week I actually have time to clutch up now.
Just remember, you're not gonna have that in college. That's what I'm trying to, you won't
Instill.
have that in college. You won't have your mom there, and you won't have this there.
That's also what my first thing was to standard base entirely was. Because at college, we don't get a proficiency scale. College, you don't get a empower. There's no line. It's did it or not. This week I give it now because high school is not taking it seriously.
And I want, our deal is to make sure you're prepared enough to when you do go to college, that you're taking it serious. And if you're gonna try to take it serious just out of nowhere, you're gonna have a
Hard time.
big curve.
I think two of the reasons behind this move, one from the teacher perspective and then one from what we heard from parents and students. From the teacher perspective, it used to be, it was even greater than 4 weeks. And so students would wait and wait and wait and then hand in a pile of work and expect immediate feedback and an updated grade while a teacher is continuing to plan. The course continues to move forward. There's work that's on time that's coming in, and there's a frustration of having this pile of late work. So we shrunk that down to 4 weeks, and now maybe this is going to be the sweet spot where 2 weeks makes sense for teachers and for students. There is some discretion. We did hear from a few staff members who said, I'll accept work at any point because for me it's about the learning, and I want them to demonstrate that they know how to do it. Teacher would still have that discretion to extend that deadline, but it is going to shrink to a 2-week minimum.
I was gonna add one more thing to that too. Like for an art class and stuff like those where it's not menial work, but it's not as pertain like an essay, then I would understand like 4 weeks or something, because also like people who are involved, like I'm missing class right now. So like stuff that like if I had sports still continuing, then I would go to practice after this. And so then 2 weeks gives me a little bit of leniency where like if I pack up my schedule with other things, I think enriching things, then it makes sense to give me a little bit of room to have late assignments. That's also what, in college I'm not gonna do 60 billion clubs of sports. Well, I might try, but it's not as easy, yeah.
We'll be checking on you.
What about like struggling students who can't meet the 2-week minimum, like for the deadline? Do they have to cooperate with the teacher and just?
Yeah, I'm hoping what this will encourage is more frequent conversations, opportunities to send a notice home, to use Parent Square, to make a phone call, to reach out and say, hey, this is due. We need to check in. And so on the student and on the teacher, if that's happening more frequently, more consistently every couple of weeks instead of every 4 or 6 weeks, that we would be able to accommodate everyone's needs. But the challenges that teachers were facing with the extended window for late work, and it sounded like some of the habits that were unintentionally being created and developed in kids about handing things in at the last minute, it made sense from what we heard from our staff to adjust that. The next one is about Empower and Skyward, and so we've decided that we're going to switch to the use of Skyward. For SBG and traditional grading, we would retire the use of Empower. This decision, again, from the parent perspective, is single login, late assignments now for traditional or standards-based grading will all appear in the same place. Conversion of that standards-based grading number to a traditional grade for ease of communication and access and interpretation. There was just so many factors that where it made sense to adjust to Skyward. Now, having said all that, it seems really simple to speak out about that level. I'm going to show you some of the next steps that the high school is going to undertake, and then we'll be interested in hearing McFarland's plan in the coming weeks as we transition to from Carlos Gonzalez going out as principal and Will Von Brock coming on. There's still some planning to be done there. So I don't mean to say there's not going to be some work behind the scenes with the infrastructure and also some learning for teachers, but we're going to invest in that, pay people to come in and build that muscle up. But it seems like this is going to be well received by most teachers.
Is MMS currently only center-based right now?
Correct.
So with this now changing, are they going to go back to traditional a little bit, or?
No, they would still stay, well, they would stay standards-based. That's a really great question, and I don't think we included it on this presentation because it is a little in the weeds. But when you remember this slide right here, the goal here in the green was that every class at Othello High School eventually be standards-based grading. What Dr. Meek developed with the high school administrators was a rubric to say which ones really make sense and which ones don't. So now we're chasing a target that isn't 100% and every class is a standards-based grading class. It's the ones that make the most sense are going to be standards-based grading, and the ones where it just doesn't fit and we're trying to, a square peg, round hole, we're going to pull back on some of those. So they're going to make some of those decisions at the school level, and I think McFarland may engage in some of those similar conversations.
Are they going to move forward with standards-based teaching?
Yeah, so if you look at this slide right here, that's exactly what the bottom part here is about. It's those three areas are standards-based teaching. My guaranteed and viable curriculum are what are the priority standards in my content area that I'm going to use, even if I'm not a standards-based grading teacher. So here's an example. PE is probably going to be exempt from standards-based grading. Might be a traditional model. It still means we should know that freshman PE with Hoyle or with Parrish or with or Stutzman or another teacher is going to be the same experience for kids, and that each of them are going to teach at a high level so that students can learn those skills, and that they're going to feel safe and connected. That's consistent and foundational to everything we're doing. The standards-based reporting part of it would be different, and so some courses don't lend themselves as well to that model.
With the with our after school program, Saturday school and stuff like that, are they also on standard-based teaching? Like, how does the curriculum work for those supports? And then is it intervention? You guys have at MS as well? Yeah. How does the grading, is there grades? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so typically in an intervention setting, it's about supporting you so that the grade you're taking in your regular course can be elevated, right? You can get work in, so it is graded in that sense. Sometimes it might be late work or just helping you catch up on a standard, those kinds of things. At Othello High School, I'm not sure what you were referencing with the after-school stuff.
We have Saturday school for freshmen, and there's also intervention during.
Yeah, it's a very similar to what McFarland's doing with some of their intervention programs. Come in and get caught up on. It's not new work or additional work. It's to help you get caught up and remediate those skills in areas you might be struggling in.
Also, dependent on which class you're struggling in, it would be traditional.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. And then one of the last things that we're pretty excited about, and I think Carlos will help lead some of this work with his work around as the athletic director and director of student engagement, the development of a behavior report card. So think of this as, I'm trying to think of your own industries that you each work in. So if you have someone at the glass shop who's really skilled at the technical parts of it, they know how to calibrate the windshields, they know how to diagnose, they know how to connect with insurance, right? They have all those skills, but they're always late to work. They call in a lot. They're not reliable. Those future-ready skills, we're thinking about a model that includes some of those and might impact a student's ability to participate in extracurricular activities or athletics if they're not being a good citizen. I was at Othello High School this morning listening to these guys and some other students talk about being connected to the school and that what it means to be a Husky. And Miles, do you remember some of the things you said about what it means to be a Husky? What some of those were?
Here, I got a whole list on me. I remember we revised it that same time too, but most of it was the almost graduate or profile type of things. So we made the anagram for Husky. It involved honest, understanding, self-aware and self-determined, kind, involved, and educated. And then each of those came with a little bit of a drop-down section of detail, what it would look like in a classroom. And then we also talked about what would that look like for in a math class, or if you take leadership, or if you did CTE one. So that this curriculum would just be taught not for only leadership kids or AVID or something, but it would be a SEL type of thing that it goes across the board.
Yeah, so imagine you're an athlete or you're in a school play or you're in band or choir. You're participating in something representing the school, maybe FFA, and you tick off all the boxes with your grades. You're passing and you're eligible, but you haven't been honest. You're not kind. You have these behavior issues, those kinds of things. Skyward may allow us an ability to track those behaviors and identify. And at the high school, they're calling them red, yellow, and green behaviors. And if you have a lot of red behaviors, we're not sure we want you representing us, that you understand how we behave here. So moving to that model, Skyward allows us to kind of address that and approach it a little bit differently, I think more holistically.
Is this a branch of 21st century.
Exactly. It may in fact end up being called that 21st century skills, future ready skills, graduate profile dispositions, something along those lines. But there'll be a group that comes together to design and develop that.
And the red, yellow, green behavior would include things like skipping or being late to class consistently
It's
and things like that.
tardies, absences, failing a certain class, referrals, yeah, within
Great.
a month capacity, I'm pretty sure, yeah, within a month. And there was one more. Suspension. There
Suspension.
you go, yeah.
Yeah, so what they just did there is they described what the high school administrators have been developing over the last year to talk about these things. So it's really cool to see the kids connect that. And what Skyward will allow us to do is to have a technical support and structure to allow us to track that thing. Yeah, so I think it's a cool opportunity to come together. Now, some of the work that's coming this summer, at OHS in particular, there's going to be some professional development for a group of lead teachers there, some other processes for them to come together and continue to talk about the scope and sequence and what we put in front of our kids every day. So lots of work to be done there. Here's the behavior report card that we just talked about and what that's going to turn into and how we're more consistent with athletic eligibility. The college and the high school courses for some of our students at the end, you may be involved in those already, but those are going to move away from the standards-based grading model. They're going to be a more traditional model to connect. We were asking teachers to keep 2 grade books, and that created some tension for folks. And then that standards-based grading course decision matrix, that's what the rubric that Dr. Meek was developing and working with the high school on to decide which courses are going to go where. So still some work to be done, but as far as down the road as we've come with SBG, I think this is going to accelerate it even just a little bit more and be more accessible for people and a more effective way of communicating with our families about how their students are doing.
The time when we rolled out a center base or Empower, did we do like parent reach something, parent night, or send out? How did we get the parents involved to see that this is what the grading is going to look like?
Yeah, we did have a couple of parent information nights, and I think what we discovered, I mean, and attendance wasn't great at those. I know they did one at a PAC meeting. What we discovered is it's difficult to change educators' mind about grading practices, people who are trained in it, live with it every day. It's even more difficult and requires more frequency in helping parents understand it. When we were at the training in Denver, I was with Kat Atchison, John Wiseman, and Mandy Perez. One of the most unsatisfying responses I got from the trainer was, well, we just have to wait till enough students have had a standards-based grading experience in their own schooling career that America will make the shift to standards-based grading. So we just got to ride it out for 20 years, Pete, and then it'll be fine. And I wasn't ready in the moment to hear that. So there's lots of training that we would need to do with our families, Miles. I think what this gives us an opportunity is it's a more realistic target. And maybe something that people would be more willing to engage in and be interested in listening to, because there's some technical things about converting it to a letter grade and connecting it to behavior. Oftentimes when you ask teachers, what's the first thing the parents ask you when they come to conferences, and they say, is Miles behaving himself? Right? How is he? Are they being good kids?
Pleasure to have in class.
Yeah. Yeah. When he shows up on time, he's great. That's probably what they say.
That was, yeah, I just want to ask you because one of the things we were talking about today with the building of what is a Husky is also parent involvement and kind of getting the kids prepared to, because parents are not in the school, so we need to equip the kids to tell their parents, this is what I'm doing at school, this is why I'm doing it, this is what the culture around, this is where you send me for 8 hours, so that's what we're doing.
I know that in years past we've had specialists who have been helping people with Empower and things like that. What does their role look like next year?
Yeah, so that question came up with a small focus group. I think it was just Wednesday or Thursday. So there's certainly going to be some conversation about whether or not that transitions to standards-based grading support, moves away from Empower coaching to some other model. So we're in a position to continue to support it. It's just who it is and how we design it. We want to make sure that teachers have the supports they need. All right. Well, I certainly appreciate the board hanging in there with us through this process. Again, I know you've taken a lot of comment and questions about it. It was an eye-opener for me to get in front of staff and to hear really this balanced perspective. There's lots of really good work that our teachers are putting in around standards-based grading and standards-based teaching. I think we need to honor the work that they've all put in, but also be mindful of the feedback we're receiving. And I think this feels like a good compromise for the district. So, thanks.
Now our star guests. We're excited to hear from our principal of McFarland Middle School for the last time as the principal of McFarland Middle School. Carlos Gonzalez, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, as you can see, there's no way to do this job by yourself, and I'm very blessed to be surrounded by a very capable group of people who not only love McFarland and our kids, but are very driven to do what's best for kids and for our staff and our community. But the reality, the truth is we are a school of improvement, and when we were identified as a school of improvement, this is something that we took very seriously and head on with our entire staff to set some goals. And really, we landed on belonging and impact, just to keep it simple. Our data through the use of our CEE survey and some feedback from kids is what can we do to create a greater sense of belonging for our kids, but not only that, what can we do to positively impact our instruction, right? So this was 2 years ago, and so what you're gonna see in this presentation, you have most of our presentation, but what I've done is work over the weekend to embed the most recent data that we have from Smarter Balance, because we're still in the middle of it. We still don't have all of it, but we're gonna share what we do have so far. Okay, so again, before I continue, I think it's important to introduce the team that I get to work with. And so starting on the end, we have Jenny Hokinson, our assistant principal, who's been with us for the last 2 years, or 3 years? 3 years. That's right. And Clint Scriven, who has been also a huge blessing to us this year. He's our fun culture guy. He didn't bring popcorn for you guys today, but he brought some candy. And but Clint's the guy who just helps to build on the idea of belonging and help people feel good about being at McFarland, as we all try to do. We have the amazing Nikki Wilkins, who's been a huge support for us in multilingual support at our school and the evolution that we've been going through this year. We have Don Bolus, who's retiring. And I've been able to work with Don for, 14, 15 years, and over 2 different schools, and he's been a blessing too, and I'm happy for Don in his retirement, but he's been helping to lead as our Dean of Athletics and Activities at MMS. And then of course, who you saw me recognize at our last meeting, Devin Lewis, who's been a godsend. I'll characterize her that way, with her expertise and experience around standards-based grading and what she's done to support STAT and be that person that go-to person to really help us out with all the work that entails. And I cannot forget to mention Denise Colley, who's sitting back there, who is our instructional coach, who's also been part of our instructional leadership team. So, and helping to be part of those discussions and lead some of the PD around what we're trying to do at MMS to just continue to improve around belonging and impact. So what you see in this first slide here is this idea of motion versus impact. This is something that Pete has shared with us and Jessica and the teaching and learning team, that for years we've been living in talking about the work, but when are we gonna get to actually doing it and set up some intentional, specific plans to create that impact? The reason why I have that up there is because for years we've been living in this idea of motion instead of action. And so this year, what we did for the first time is, instead of making resources available, and that's when you see passive versus active, passive is more of just making resources available, like, here's a strategy if you want to use it, versus active, where, hey, when we teach reading, this is how we're gonna teach reading at MMS moving forward. And so that would be one example. Over the years so far, we've conducted 621 walks. That does not include formal observations. These walks have been very focused around how we teach at McFarland. So when we come in and we see reading, we're giving feedback about how the reading is being taught, if it's to a high degree or not. And but also with that it's empathetic and supportive, and what can we do to support you through this. This is something that I use. This is something from the Association of Washington School Principals. That's an amazing organization, huge support there. But when it comes to this leadership continuum, you'll see over the top their first year and their years 2 through 5 and years 5+. One of the most important things you could do in a new principalship in a different building is really focus on the culture and help to establish the importance of relationships with the people you're going to work with. Because my job as a principal is to, first and foremost, hire the best teachers I can, and to also improve the ones that I have, right? And it starts with culture and relationships. But after that, what you also see is in years 2 through 5, because this has been a frustration of mine, and I have shared these in board meetings, change in education does take time. But with time and setting up the right systems, eventually with the right culture, with the right systems, it will eventually lead to positive student outcomes in learning. So that's the idea, and that's why it's important to share this leadership continuum to give you a visual of what that means and looks like. So at MMS, we have this idea of belonging and impact there on the left. And what we did at the beginning of the year to really hone in on, here's the expectation that when we teach reading, when we have our kids read, you're a reading teacher. You're not just an ELA teacher. You're not just a math teacher, a history or science teacher. If you have your kids read anything, guess what? You're a reading teacher. And this is how we're going to do it. These are different ways to do that. So equipping our teachers with high effect size strategies in the pre, during, and post as an example to help focus how we teach at McFarland. And this is the first year that we've done that. But also what you see is this effort around how we teach reading or the specific strategies for multilingual support, for example, or how we help manage our kids with Teach Like a Champion, also lends itself into the instructional alignment that we've been building on it in the OSD. Probably the most profound professional learning experience I've had has been in the Othello School District with our principal PLC. It has been the most, I've experienced most growth as an educational leader because of that principal PLC and the people I get to work with and to see the cool work that's happening in the elementary schools. But when you have 4 different systems that feed into one elementary school, let's have a conversation about how we can align what and how we teach so that when we have 4 systems feed into one school, what can we do to keep that going? And so that's why I'm also really looking forward to the instructional alignment work that's coming up. So special thanks to Pete and how he's reorganized the leadership structure and with the support with Josh Meek, John Wiseman, Amy Paris, the rest of the teaching and learning team, but also with the executive directors of instructional alignment with Justin Johnson and Christina Benjamin, who have made some really great gains also in their systems, but also in our principal PLC. What can we do to just continue to align how we teach, what we do and how we teach it? So this is the data that we have so far. What you'll see here on the right side of it, you'll see 24-25 on the right. This is the most current data that we have. The lighter green is the ELA. The darker green is math. The 2 previous years since I've been in McFarland, you'll see that we are showing a positive increase or a positive trend line, but it's not enough to me. To me, I want to do more. I want to have more gains, but nonetheless, it's still on a positive trend line. To be clear, though, as of today, I checked this morning, and again, as at like 10, 11 a.m., in ELA, only 209 kids out of about 350-ish have been scored. And then in math, same, 320, but we're pretty close to having all the data on the math so far. So that's what it looks like in 7th grade. When we get into 8th grade, it kind of levels out, but still positive nonetheless between ELA and math in 8th grade. And when we look at the grade levels combined, we're on a positive trend. So as each year our kids come through 7th and 8th grade at McFarland, we're showing improvements, but we're not going to take credit for that. This is also something that our kids are coming to us with from the elementary schools. So this, if we're having any success, of course, it's going to be because of how our kids are coming more prepared from the elementary schools and the work we're doing together as a PLC. So kudos to them, of course, too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this over to Nikki, who has been a huge help to us with her expertise and experience in multilingual support. And so she's going to speak to some information on these next 2 slides and share this data with you.
So early on, Carlos reached out and the McFarland team has made a lot of commitments around supporting language development while they're teaching their content. And so that's something that's really crucial is that you have to understand your grade level standards in order to be a language teacher, because this isn't in isolation. This is to drive instruction and to complement what should be going on in classes, but make sure all of our students are accessing it no matter what their proficiency level is in academic English. So we're really excited to report that we have 11 students who have met proficiency according to the state criteria. And what that means is that on the WIDA Access score, they scored a 4.7 overall. We had 7 students who did that by themselves. However, the state also recognized that the WIDA Access is informed by different assessments. So one of the assessments that they do analyze is the ESPA. And so when the state was looking at what students were meeting that 4.7 criteria, but still weren't necessarily, or I'm sorry, the students that were not meeting the 4.7 criteria, but they still were achieving a proficiency level 3 or 4 on ESPA, there was a difference. And so the state responded by including students who score a 4.3 to a 4.6 and also meet proficiency on the ESPA ELA are also considered exited, and then we monitor them for 2 years. And so now with the current data, we're at 11 students who have met exit criteria, and we have 6 that are still on our watch list. Like Carlos was saying, the ESPA data is still trickling in, so we still have a potential for 6 more students to join the exit criteria. This is a huge celebration because when the students move into 6th grade, they take a middle school level assessment for their language proficiency. So it is difficult for students to maintain their proficiency and increase their proficiency because the rigor required of them is that of the grade level. So these students are looking like grade level peers in accessing their classes. We have 288 students at McFarland that are ML, so it's about 40% of our students. If we could go to the next slide, which is really exciting because what that means is we can see a shift that our students are moving into this level 3 called developing and level 4 expanding. We did have a student reach bridging this year. We're always going to have some students that are in different proficiency levels. So for example, a level 1 entering means that they are new to English, entering the language. And we did have newcomers join us this year that are brand new to English. So we're gonna have some students in that proficiency level. However, we don't want students to stay in that proficiency level. And so we can see that we're shifting students out of the early proficiency range into the later proficiency range. So a developing student is a student that's acquiring more autonomy and navigating the language by themselves, but they still need clear supports from their teachers. And that's one of the things that McFarland committed to this year, is to have some consistency through strategies like QSSA and simultaneous roundtable. And then we have some students that went into the expanding range, and those are the students where I'm talking about that 4.3 and higher, where ESPA ELA is going to show how are they doing with grade level standards, because that's ultimately what we want to see them is succeeding in grade level standards. And then finally, bridging is that they're comparable to a native English speaking peer. And 6 would be considered reaching, and in our school district, we often see students reach that proficiency level in listening, but they're still working towards it in some of their other domains like reading and writing. One of the big celebrations was that Denise, Carlos, and I collaborated, and we targeted 105 students with an intervention to improve their expressive skills around writing. And I'm really excited that 156 students made growth in writing. And so what that tells me is not only did we see our paraeducators make commitments around that around the intervention, but the classroom teachers are really making those commitments as well, because this test is driven by content. So they'll have a science prompt, they'll have a math prompt, a social studies prompt, and an ELA prompt. So if our content teachers weren't doing the work, we wouldn't see growth like that.
Thank you. But it's also fair to share something that I pay attention to is how are our kids doing over time? So through their OSD experience, whether they start in 4th or 5th grade, through 7th and 8th grade with us, how are we doing? Are we starting to level that line off? Is it starting to get better? Or this is data that I also share with our team. And so what you see on this slide here is for ELA, our class of 2030 current 7th grade and class of 2029 current 8th grade, this is the data over time through the grade levels as they come to McFarland. And so this has been a trend for some time now that we're still working to turn around, even though the data right now is showing a positive trend or improvement, which shows that some of what we're doing is working, but we still have plenty of room to grow. This is a focus of mine of how we can continue to turn things around in McFarland, because we are a school of improvement. What can we do to change this trend from that continues to drop or to level off so that in time it continues to increase or rise? And so this is something that I keep in front of me that drives me all the time. And this is something I'm sure that when I pass this on to Will, who has a copy of this now, is gonna use some of this data. And I'm sure this is gonna be a part of his discussions with his new department chair group. This is the math data right now for our current 7th and 8th graders through the years, over the last 4 years. So when you look at this, this is 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade, 5th grade for the class of 2029. And this is why we were identified as a school of improvement. And we have, we're doing everything we can to turn that around. But I can also say that we are showing some signs of growth. We're getting better. And so we're implementing the systems to do that. So prior to the announcement to transition into a director role for the school district, these were the recommended next steps that I'd communicated with Pete and meeting with some of the teaching and learning team of what I was going to suggest as we were getting ready to prepare our professional development over summer, and especially getting ready for August. And what I'd communicate is just, we're setting up some systems, especially and refining in what we teach and how we teach it. Of course, that we can attribute to our experience with standards-based grading. But the next step for us is, what can we do to improve our instructional rigor? What can we do to put work in front of our kids that meets a DOK level 3 or 4, and being intentional with the use of questions that we can pull from Content Explorer, for example, that we've been doing in our alignment work in our principal PLC with the elementaries. That is something that we can continue to build on. This idea of gradual release, direct instruction in what I do, and then what we do together with our kids, and then releasing them to do it on their own, but at a high level with rigor. And reviewing the phases of learning, where it's surface to deep, and transferring that learning. Something that's been a focus for us is Teach Like a Champion strategies, where we continue what we've been doing through strong voice, cold calling kids, no opting out, and radar and BCing looking as strategies, but also introducing exemplar planning, stretching it, right is right, and the art of the sentence. And this is something that we would equip our teachers with through professional development in summer, and especially in August. Real quick, for the next steps in multilingual learner support, I'm gonna hand this over to Nikki. This is something that we've built together, but she would be much more eloquent than I.
I'm really excited because McFarland and OHS decided to partner up on supporting our students that are new to our country and new to English. And so one of the things prior to this year is that our newcomers had an experience, but we didn't have a lot of guaranteed outcomes. And because we didn't have a lot of guaranteed outcomes, we weren't able to help students successfully navigate when they move into grade level content. Because again, that's what's most important, is we want our students to be able to navigate the grade level and reach the standards for their developmental age. And so when we think about that, it would have to look different at secondary than it does in elementary. And so McFarland and I, with OHS and their ML teachers, have been collaborating on improving our courses that we have students go and learn some of the foundational skills, because there are different types of multilingual students and there's different types of newcomers. So we have newcomers that come with a strong educational background and a lot of literacy in their first language, such as Spanish, but then we do have some newcomers that are new to school. And so even though they're in middle school and high school, this is their first opportunity to consistently go to school. And so we need to make sure that we're giving them the opportunities that they need at the developmental appropriateness that they need. And so what we're committing to is helping our students learn how to read through a Foundations for Literacy class, a Foundations for Expression, where we're helping them speak and write clearly in the patterns of English. And then also that we're providing them some opportunities to link their background knowledge and the funds of knowledge that they're bringing with them and the experiences that they're bringing with them in a class like language for STEM, and then also sheltered history and sheltered math. And then we're having our one ML teacher, Rose Barajas, is going to have a new teammate, Mario Vargas, and so they can really start partnering and look at data with me, and then also collaborate with OHS, where we can be comparing data and instructional strategies for what's working and what's not, as we continue to improve not just an experience, but have some guaranteed outcomes for our students.
Thank you. And then ultimately, the recommended step around feedback and assessment is not just making aggressive monitoring available, but saying, hey, this is what we need to do next. And so we're gonna provide some training. This is what it looks like. Now that we've had a year under our belt with standards-based grading, and we've been living in the language of proficiency scales of what's at a 3 or 3.5 or 4, what can we do to use that language and to get more immediate feedback to kids or about their learning using aggressive monitoring as an approach and make that an expectation? Moving from it being a resource and passive to active, and this is the expectation, right? And so reviewing high impact reading strategies, which I did discuss earlier, something that we have always done historically, at least in my experience at MMS, we put so much weight into claim 1 reading comprehension. What can we do to do more for our kids around claim 2 for writing across the content and share it with our teams? So what this means here is in ELA, through the 3 different modes of writing, our ELA team will share and head up narrative writing. Our history team will share and head up argumentative and science. It's only appropriate that they live in the exposition or expository, excuse me. And so what can we do to just create this shared responsibility as a staff instead of it just living in ELA, right? And so that's what we're gonna do. Our teams have embraced it. Denise Colley has been heading this up with a team of teacher leaders in each of the grade levels and content areas. And what's interesting is there's a desire for this from our teachers. It's not just us saying, hey, this is what we're gonna do. This is an expressed desire that they've communicated to us to share this together as a system. And so we're on the right track. But also through that work, what you'll see is an emphasis on rubric alignment, that when we write, what are the expectations? What does a 1 look like? What does a 2 look like? What does a 3? What does a 4? And being very clear and descriptive so that we know what to expect in the alignment process to then eventually lead to greater scoring consistency across the contents and grade levels. So that's where we're headed. But again, these are my recommended steps. This is something I'm sharing with Will, and it's gonna be up to him now to carry the torch for MMS with this team, and it'll be up to him, and he's already doing a great job of having some one-on-ones with staff and teachers and getting some really good feedback, and he is taking the time to meet with our department chair group today, for example, to start having that conversation of what's next, what's appropriate for us, what is the data telling us, and what do we need to do next to get ready for summer in August so we're ready to go when school begins.
All right, so through our work of sense of belonging and culture, it led Carlos and I's work in Mustang Leaders for Change, bringing in a group of 7th graders and a group of 8th graders, and as we move forward in the future, mixing it up a little bit more, getting some a wider group of student representation. But that sense of belonging brought up some key phrases: safety. Dr. Perez had a slide in there with multiple steps tiered, and that bottom block was a safety or feeling of safe, being safe. So that was a lot of our drive in some of our questions and our work with our students. And so some of the input that we received from both grade levels were around our hallways and their sense of safe in our hallways, which then we got their input, and with that, we're working on bringing in, I guess, tape for the floors, separating the right from the left. Like, yeah, a little bit of COVID action, but I think with a little more class and, yes, staying in your lanes, you know.
Prepare 'em for a driver's ed.
Exactly. You know, Zaro, you talk about real life, you know, it's driving in the right lane or, you know, so helping the students recognize that they need to be on one side of the hall so the flow of traffic and people aren't bumping into each other and colliding and things of that nature. So bathrooms, just increasing our supervision in bathrooms. We're discussing some of the privacy slats that can fill the gap in between the doorways, just to give the students a little more sense of, safe and privacy. And our work with our cell phones, the students gave us some good feedback. We still have a little bit of gains that we can make, but that's really made a shift in the students feeling safe, especially in years past having those cell phones in the bathrooms. And then they touched base on clothing, the baggy, loose clothing, all the dark clothing that the students are wearing. So Jenny and I have talked about implementation of some more clothing guidelines and moving forward. And so that's some of our work with the Mustangs Leaders for Change in those areas to improve the belonging and safe, helping the kids feel safer at school.
Okay, so Jenny and Clint, Chad Smith and I had an opportunity to go to the Jostens Renaissance Conference this past summer. And one of the things that we brought back, it's just a great conference, gives all kinds of ideas for schools to help improve everything they're doing. 3 of them, we came back looking at an idea called the Renaissance card that a lot of the schools use to recognize, reward, and reinforce what their students are doing, the students that are doing what we'd like them to do. And one of the first things along that line is, what values do we have as a school? And so we said academics, belonging, and character. So we changed the name of the Renaissance card that they were using to ABC card, so that we could remember what our values were there. And then within those, if we have the goals within those ABCs, how might we achieve them? And this is Renaissance kind of formula for having success. Respect the values that you have, recognize those that are moving in the direction that you want them to go, reward them, reinforce them, build relationships, and get the results you want. So then we thought, okay, so what are inside of those goals, what are the things that we want that we can measure and see if they actually are moving towards those goals? So we had 4 different things. This was coming after the Olympics and everything. So we have the bronze level, and all of them are aligned with academics, attendance, and behavior. And we certainly want them to move to the platinum level. And to be honest, it took quite a while through the first quarter and some of the second quarter, because even after we talk about it in an assembly, a quarter later they're going, what's an ABC card? They're getting it now. As an example, well, let me show you how we recognize, reward, and reinforce. So if you earn a bronze card, then your reward is what we have there. And then moving up the silver with greater rewards, gold, and then the elite level of platinum and the rewards that they get. As an example, platinum, last quarter, we had 6 students in the school reach the platinum level. This latest quarter, we had 39. So the students are paying attention. They're starting to finally get, oh, and they're paying attention to the posters on the wall now and saying, what do I need to do? How come I wasn't at platinum level? How come I only got gold? And so they're digging into it a little bit. And then we have the reinforcement part. It was an important part of going through the classrooms during their advisory, and it might be like a treat. And all of them that have an ABC card. So the first few times we were doing this, we had told them, you need to keep your ABC card on them. Well, we'd come in and we'd reward those that had their ABC card so we could see, other kids could see, well, why are they getting a treat? And so now those kids, they carry that card with them, and the other kids recognize it, and we're getting more students involved that way. We still have this part to move forward, and that's the staff. Little things, even the important part of it is recognizing when somebody's doing something that you're wanting to, and rewarding them and reinforcing. And a little simple thing that we started last year is secret staff dress-up days. And you'd get a few student or staff members that would dress up with whatever we were doing. For example, last month we had inflatables for the day, had a race outside, great fun. Well, we would go around during the day, and the staff members that dressed up, they would get a treat. The attendance of the staff members that are doing, that participated is going up a lot. Just recognizing little things like that. But we're just in the beginning of the ABC cards, and there's a lot more that they can do, hopefully, moving forward for both students and staff.
Okay, my turn. So one thing I just want to thank Dawn for doing so much work with that ABC cards. And if you guys ever get a chance to go to Jostens Renaissance training, I would suggest it. It's mostly put on by students, and it's amazing. So I'll be super quick with STAT. You guys have seen something like this before when I presented in the past. STAT has, they have incentives or they have interventions depending on if they have a red card or a green card. Red card means is they've been targeted. This year is all targeted interventions, so teachers request students to come if they know they're not meeting standard. If we can go ahead and flip. This is how many, I hope you guys don't mind me standing up. Sitting down is really hard. Okay, so if we're looking at this and we look at the grade level and the content and everything here, these are the minutes and hours and time that kids have spent in interventions. That we have had teachers targeted and run interventions, and how many times they've been able to reach students. Sometimes those are repeat students, but sometimes those are also just somebody that needs to be checked in. One of the things that we did during STAT was, Nikki had already talked about it, is they had pulled like the WIDA students during that intervention time and targeted them, and that's when they were able to help get them the intervention they need. Moving forward, our next steps, talking with Will a little bit in the last week or so, one of the things that we want to really hone in on our intervention piece is really kind of focus on what we're missing in our math and ELA classes, especially with our SBG or with our SBA standards. You know, you saw those lines, they're trending up a little bit, but they're not trending up quite as much as we want, or they're a little flat-lined or going down with our cohort, and we want to make sure that we are addressing those more specifically, more targeted, and more intentionally, and we're gonna pressure up the heat a little bit on our interventions and what those look like, and being very more specific. We did that a little bit this year with saying this is what we expect to see in interventions and doing walkthroughs in interventions, but next year it's gonna be even upping it up more so that we can definitely hit most of those students. And also students are now realizing, hey, I can request to go to intervention. So now we're having more and more student requesting teachers target them because they're like, hey, I didn't get that and I need to know that. So can you target me next week? And they will do that. And so a lot of teachers are reporting that that's what a lot of students are starting to take that, hey, I'm not doing great. I need to make sure I have access to my teacher. So please target me into that 30-minute block. Okay?
Last thing we're going to touch on is our standards-based grading experience in our first full year of implementation. I'm going to hand this over to Devin Lewis on the end.
So what you're seeing here is kind of our learning experiences, and I'm going to start with the negatives and work our way into the positives. We've had it was a rough start to the year, but I think as we move into the consistency piece and really looking at what our students are doing and what they're starting to say, we're improving. So some of the big things that we've learned and we want to improve on is our consistency. And I think you've heard that as a theme today in general, talking about being consistent and really getting the kids to understand a process and whether it's ABC cards or stat. As they do something more and more frequently, they're going to understand it better. But the big consistency piece is also for teachers. So when you're grading something in math class, if I'm grading it versus Nikki's grading it, there should be some similarity in consistency and how it's getting graded and what's being graded. And so that's one of our next steps is how do we make sure that a class that I'm teaching and a class that Dawn or Nikki are teaching, which obviously they don't, but you get the point, that it's the same across the board. There are some training opportunities that we feel are out there for our staff. And this was things Carlos tasked me with actually interviewing a bunch of our staff, and I did, and these were some of their ideas. Scoring group work when it comes to SBG is quite difficult because you don't know who did the work. As most of you have done a group project in life, someone usually ends up doing a lot more work than others, especially in school. And so how do you assess the learning with group work? And that's something that we would, as staff, wanted more information on, as well as how to effectively report learning for our IEP, our ML, and our 504 students. We had an experience earlier this year where we had a whole bunch of students that were put in a sheltered math class, and suddenly they already had 3s in scales that were like, no, they don't. There's no way. And it turned out the teacher from the previous year was like, oh, well, they're trying so hard, I'm gonna give them a 3. But that doesn't accurately report the learning. And so we need some training on how to accurately report the learning without hurting the student's grade. Because in the end, that's what parents do look at is say, okay, what did my student get? Well, why is my student getting a C? Well, because they're not there yet in their learning. And so that's one of the things that we wanted to really focus on is how can we get that learning reported accurately while also giving the parents information like, yeah, they're trying really, really, really hard. This is not for lack of effort. This is just they're struggling in the content. And then how to work with some of our cyclical classes, as I'm sure you guys have experienced, but also our teachers are experiencing. There are some of those scales that we teach all year long, like math and ELA. They might want to teach fractions, decimals, and percents all year, but the scale is only for one semester. And so how do we accurately report and grade or assess that information over a whole year? So that was something else that we was a struggle, specifically in ELA, math, and our AVID classes as well. We, again, wanted to look at some opportunities for alignment, better alignment, and that came from especially our classes where our 7th and 8th graders are taking high school credit classes. And so our algebra class, for example, if they're taking algebra in 7th grade, they're gonna get a high school credit for it. And I'm pretty sure our high school teachers are expecting those 7th grade, those kids to actually have a course that's equivalent to what they would get in high school. And so we wanna make sure that there's some alignment across schools to make sure a lot of that is being taught. So if we drop a scale or they drop a scale, it's like, wait, this class isn't the same now as this class. They're not equivalent. So we want to, back one. Yep, and then again, just more time for our PLCs to have that alignment within themselves, what they're grading and what they're doing next. But to the positives, and this is my favorite part, I am seeing a huge mindset shift in our students and our staff. It's really going from that idea of, oh, well, I did it, miss, here. You wrote your name on the top. No, I'm not giving you full credit because you wrote your name on the top. Like, that's not how it works. And so a lot of our students are now starting to see that it's not task completion, it's that learning mastery and what are they learning. And And we are seeing a lot of that shift in the language the kids are using. They're starting to talk about their learning. They're talking about scales. When I see on my Go Guardian, I'll frequently see kids have Empower up, and then I get an email, Miss, I still only have a 2.5 in algorithms. What can I do to bring that up to a 3? I really want that 3.0 scale, or 3.0 on my scale. And so they're starting to use that language, and they're seeing, we have graphs that I show the kids in Empower, and they can see their learning over time, and they really start to get excited about that improvement of score over time. And so they do really see that in Empower on their that improvement. Our staff are starting to think more this way too. I had a conversation with one of our teachers who, the conversation did not go as I thought it was going to. I thought they were going to tell me how much they hated it. And it turned out that they really didn't. They were talking about mastery in skills in a PE class. And not just, oh, my kids know how to play softball. They actually were saying, oh, that kids are learning and they know how that they need to show how they can throw and how they can, I don't even like taking PE, but I wouldn't know what I'm doing. But they were talking about that ability to talk about the skills rather than talk about the grade. It wasn't so much that the grade was the important part, it's did I learn what I needed to learn? And then teachers are actually looking back at what this mastery looks like and being really intentional about how they're teaching. And there's a lot less of the, what are those? Well, it's just like the fun things, like, oh, we're gonna do a crossword puzzle today, or we're gonna do a coloring page. That kind of busy work, there's the word, it was busy work is really kind of out the window, because a lot of teachers are going, well, can this activity that we're doing today show evidence of student learning? And if it can't, why are we doing it? It doesn't mean anything. So we are there. I see that shift. Now, are we there 100%? Absolutely not. But with consistency in our systems and the way that we're doing the support that our building is getting, I think we're going to get there pretty fast. And I do think that being all in this year has made a huge difference. This had a whole lot more on it before I had to change it last Wednesday when we found out that Empower is not going to be there. So this was a couple things that came up in my conversations with staff. One, to help our ML learners as well as our students who are not yet reading and or proficient in reading, we wanted to create some infographics and some visuals around our proficiency scales to really help students see what these scales mean. So maybe we have the word, I use the word list is a good verb. We want them to be able to list these things. And so maybe we have a graphic, a common graphic across the district that when the scale requires a list, they see that visual next to it and then go, oh, I remember what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to bullet point certain things. And so we can start taking all those verbs that we're using across the district and create a system for visuals that would really work and help our kids see what they're supposed to do, not just read it. And then communicating to parents how all of this works. That was a big one. And then our advisory and stat time, being able to help students check in with their grades, and goal setting, targeted interventions, those kinds of things.
Thanks, Tiffany. So I know that sounded like a lot today, but that's just really in the grand scheme of things, or the greater scope of things. It's a small portion of what we do, but still carries significant weight. And so thank you for being patient with us and taking the time to listen to us. But you're welcome to ask any questions or offer any comments, and I'll do the best I can to answer questions.
Mr. Clint, sorry, I didn't get your last name. Scriven. What is, you said you're the culture guy, like what does your day-to-day look like with the kids?
Well, so
I coined that.
yeah. So just personality-wise, bringing the treats, carry around treats with me, just get interaction with the students, get them talking more, interacting with an adult more. And so when he's talking about culture guy, I do a lot for the staff. I do Popcorn Friday every other Friday for the staff. My wife and I put together During the winter time, it was bring your own mug Monday. And so we'd bring in a Keurig and some cocoa, and the staff would just bring in their mugs, and all the good stuff would be there, all the toppings. Scavenger hunts, and, Easter egg hunts. I'd hide Easter eggs with prizes in them. Just things that, get the teachers in a good mood, just help bring that enjoyment back into what they're doing. And it's just remember why we get into education for the students.
Is it sort of like a para role where you're to certain classrooms, or you're just kind of floating through the day?
Oh, no. So I'm in charge of 7th grade, and so I still have all my class walks.
He's an assistant principal.
I'm an assistant principal.
Oh, okay.
So, sorry.
He's the culture guy. That's what I'm thinking, like,
Ding.
Miles, he's you, Miles. He's a student and he's the culture for the class.
We went to Sunnyside recently, and there's a guy named Mr. Martinez there who's literally the
Dave.
culture guy.
Yeah,
So
he is.
I thought
But
that
he's
he
also
was
an assistant principal and athletic
Yeah,
director. So, yeah, we're very similar in that ways. Yeah, he's out in front of the team, on game days and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's kind of my role, bringing some joy, but also all the other aspects of an assistant principal.
I have a question for remind me your name. Sorry, I think it was Jennifer. Or sorry. Yeah. So you mentioned how you help for the multilingual students. What exactly do you guys do to help them be able to talk master the English language?
So I have the opportunity this year to partner with all the schools in our district, and specifically at McFarland. This summer, our school district is using a program called Elevation, where it houses all of our data for our students, but then it also has strategies that teachers can commit to, and then they can use their data to inform them of how to help students participate more based on where they're at in their language development. So, for example, there's a strategy called QSSA, and that is really just like a protocol or a checklist on how to turn and talk with your partner using academic English. And so based on where you're at in your proficiency level, if you're in the higher numbers like 4 and 5, you're going to be a lot more comfortable after your teacher teaches you, or you view something or you read something, to remember all of those key academic words and then churn and share with your partner whatever the question was that the teacher asked you to talk about. If you're still learning and you're like, I kind of understood what the assignment is and I understood the content, but it's just this picture in my mind and I still need support in the specific words to use, then the teacher would provide something like a word bank. So those key words that your teacher's walking around hoping that you're using to show that you're learning that content are available for you, because when you're earlier in your proficiency, you might understand it, but you're like, I don't remember how to say that word, or I don't remember exactly what that word was. So McFarland did some training this summer with Elevation around strategies, and then teachers are implementing that through their content. So when I partner with someone like Devin, and I partnered in her CTE class because she had some students newer to English join her. And so we strategize, like, what do you want your students to be able to do? Is it something that they need to share expressively by speaking, or is it something that they could show you by modeling it? And so it really just depends on where the student is, and that's where I get to partner with either the principals or the actual teachers, and we say, what are the students telling us that they need extra practice in order to be successful in that content area?
I will also add, we used our data to see which strategies make the most sense for us and our kids. Also, I know you guys have also heard the idea of effect size. So what are the highest effect size strategies that we're needing to address specific domains, whether it's reading, writing, speaking, or listening? And so we were very intentional and strategic about what we're going to put in front of our teachers, and not just giving it to them as a resource, but modeling it for them and saying, here's the expectation moving forward. And we're going to give you feedback on that.
Could we go over this? I don't remember it on the slide, but there's this one graph here. It's explaining, I think, the SBA scores or something. I'm not sure, but on one of the criteria, it says MMS white, and then it goes from 60 to like 50 something.
Oh yeah, that's a hidden slide. that's a hidden slide that I have, but I can easily talk about it. That has all of the data, even broke down into subgroups. When you look at Smarter Balanced Assessment data, it can be broken down into subgroups by race or ethnicity. Across Washington State, when you look at Hispanics or Latinos, for example, across the state, it's 26.1%, I believe, across the entire state. But our demographics in our community, it's 90.1%. And so when we think about our demographic and who we want to serve, who we do serve, it's like, what can we do to improve our practice to support our demographic here in Othello? So specific to our demographic, because we're such a high ELL community, I know Nikki mentioned it earlier. At McFarland, we have roughly 700 students, and more than 40% of our kids take the WIDA assessment, which means that a language other than English is spoken in the home. So when they have to take the assessment, what that means is we have to be much more intentional in differentiating instruction for our kids, and being much more intentional in the strategies and using high effect size strategies with them. And so that's why we're moving more from what we've done historically in the past around being passive and making resources available to teachers to, hey, moving forward, when we teach reading or when we manage our kids or when we teach math and using VEPS as an example, we're gonna be much more specific and intentional in the strategies that we use, and these are the reasons why. And so it really is also tied to high effect size strategies.
Carlos, on that, you sat there and said Hispanic, Latino. Okay, where's the breakdown even further? Where's either being Spanish speaking, Mixteco, where's that breakdown?
That breakdown, you could find the students' languages in the home and elevation, and that's something that Nikki and Denise have helped us with data for our kids.
Because you're technically asking a kid there to learn 3 languages at one time. And that is what we can all sit here and say, you know, we're all Latino, and that might have worked when I was in school. It's not that way now. Now you have Mixteco, you have you have several different ones. And so when you're sitting there and you ask them to go home, it's one of the hardest things I have for Luticaga is when you have a mom student who comes to class and they come to work, you're asking them to go back home and they don't speak neither English or Spanish back at their home. They're speaking something else. And so you're asking that kid now where you guys are effectively trying to teach them 2 languages or at the high school or at the junior high, sorry, at Luda, now you're trying to teach them 3. Yeah. That kid has a lot harder hill to climb. So I'm just, I want to get away from saying Latino or Hispanic because now it just doesn't mean that. There's so many much more that we have in this community that it'd be nice just to break it down so that we knew, okay, you know, 40% of the Latinos, well, you know what, 20% of them are mum.
I could tell you like 8 to 10 years ago, it used to be English, Spanish, and some Mixteco. But now, I mean, Nikki could also elaborate more on this on the several different number of dialects that our community has.
And the reason why I know is because I deal with it at work every day. And so it's very hard for me when I'm looking at them wanting to speak Spanish to them and they look at me like, oh, yeah.
I think it's actually really interesting that you bring that up because the students that I had this first semester in my class, one of them actually came from, oh gosh, I can't remember what country, but spoke mum only. And in fact, we learned as I was trying to teach her how to use a ruler, because that's one of the skills in my class, realizing she didn't actually think in base 10, which is what our numerical system is. She thought in the Mayan number system, which is dots and dashes. It's actually a base 20 system. So but it goes back to kind of that SBG thing that we're doing. I had to go, okay, my goal was to get her to measure to 1/8 of an inch. And she could get the system down. She didn't have to understand what 1/8 of an inch was, but she could figure out, okay, here's a line. And with the systems that we created for her, she was able to put a ruler next to it, understand what each line represented, even though that didn't compute 1/8 for her, didn't mean anything. but she understood what it meant and she could write down the actual measurement. And so we were looking back at the skills that were necessary. Could she verbalize it? No, but she could measure to 1/8 of an inch. And so that's kind of, it goes back to what we're doing with SBG and the intentionality behind what skills do we need them to have. And so I think that it was a really good connection.
And one thing I wanted to clarify is when our students join us at McFarland or at the high school, what we're really working on is comprehensible input, because WIDA's standards, or our language standards, are actually our content standards. So we have language for social and instructional purposes, language for English language arts, language for science, language for social studies, and language for mathematics. And so at middle school and high school, we're not trying to teach them multiple languages. We're trying to make sure that they have access to their content standards. And so when we talk about them joining Devin's class, we know that they come with funds of knowledge, and we know that they're coming as middle schoolers. And so they have all of these experiences up, till they're 12 years old. And so if we can tie in their previous experiences, even if she hadn't been familiar with the base 10 system, she is familiar with measuring, and she is familiar with representation. And we know all the developmental milestones that they reach by the time they're in middle school. It's just simple child development. It doesn't matter what language. We knew that we would be able to show her, this is representative of measurement here, and this is US customary, because we also have the metric. Well, I think it was the metric system, sorry. That was 5th grade. But what we're really trying to do is make sure that they can access their content standards. And so the way we do that is through comprehensible input, especially at McFarland and at the high school, because we are focused, and our language, the dominant language at the middle school and high school, is English, and we're gonna be assessing them in English. If they do have a Spanish background that they're coming to us with, then things like the ESPA in math, we can put it's not an accommodation, it's a designated support. You can have a designated support for the Spanish to be layered on, but they also will have it available in English, because that's the way we assess in the United States currently. And so that's a little bit of a mind shift, where when we're not in a dual language program and we're newcomers in like McFarland or an English dominant school like Hiawatha, then we're working on comprehensible input so that they can gain academic English.
I have one more thing on the hidden slide again. So, sorry. Okay, it's just a little concerning. The MMS, I see the MMS Hispanic Latino. This is the ESPA scores, correct? Or, like, what are these? It just says ELA at the top for me here.
Let me pull up, see what you're looking at.
And then
Yeah, these are ESPA scores in ELA and in math.
And then so with the MMS white, it goes from 66 to
Yeah,
57.
our white students at McFarland that make up 10% of our student population
So
are
it's like
performing
5
at
of
or
them
better
do-
than the state.
Huh. Well, what's happening there? Like, we can see with the Hispanic Latino that, the language barrier, but then if they do know English, what now?
I would go to just other factors that affect learning. Socioeconomic factors, language is definitely one that you already addressed. Also the different dialects that we have 4 different dialects at a minimum here in the Othello School District now when it comes to, or languages, I should say, English, Spanish, Mixteco, and Mom. Am I missing any right now?
We also have Quiche and Quechua, but the dominant language other than English in our district is Spanish, and a lot of those students do have experience in Spanish depending on their access to education. So like in Guatemala, if they were able to access school, they would have accessed it in English if they were in a bigger city. It just depends on the student.
I would love to figure out, you say Spanish is I'm pretty sure there's quite a bit more Hmong-speaking people, and pretty close to overtaking the Spanish version of it.
So it depends on who you're looking at. So when we went to the Wabe conference last year, we did a lot of learning around there are different types of ML students. And so at McFarland, because everyone ends up at McFarland, we see this really play out because have the whole community there. But it really depends on that student's journey. And so a lot of the formal education would have been received in Spanish for a lot of the countries that are joining us right now. But they do have home languages other than Spanish also. So it really just depends on the family's experiences in their home countries before they come to us.
And Aaron, what was it? There was she was from Bellevue, right? What did she say, 126 languages that was spoken in Bellevue? And I'm just trying to figure out their numbers. I'm just trying to figure it out.
I think just would like to add one point maybe for Miles and to bring a different perspective to the conversation. It's a little bit broader than I think just the language spoken in the home and some of the racial or ethnic factors that the state asks us to monitor. In a community like ours, where the median income is so low, across the country and across the world, language is so influenced by poverty. The experiences that you have, the words spoken in your home, the opportunity to access language, and that has to happen in school. And so a place like Bellevue can have 100 languages, and we might only have 3, but if the income level is different in Bellevue and the experiences that those kids have, even though they speak a number of different languages, the gap to English is still greater in a place like Othello. And one of the reasons it's important to track data like that to see the outcomes that we're getting is because at scale you can say, hey, our brown boys are lagging behind everyone, not only in Othello, but in Pasco and in Bellevue and in Seattle. What do we think about that? So it's important that we track that data, and it's much broader than just saying what's the language at home or how many there are. There are so many other factors layered in there.
I think, yeah, that's kind of what my question was pointing to, because on the MLS White, it goes down almost 10 points over 2 years, 2022 to 2024.
Yeah, so think about that in a place like Othello, where you might only have 10% of our students that would be categorized as white. In a class of 300, how many kids would that be?
30.
30, right?
So,
So 30
okay,
kids,
so
and
if they do badly, that's
exactly.
Oh, okay.
There you go, scale.
But Miles, this is why we're so intentional about multilingual support. This is why we're intentional about the use of Elevation, because one of the cool things that Elevation does is it not only captures all of the data and how they perform in the different domains of reading, writing, speaking, listening, and what levels they are at each with a composite score. It can tailor instruction to every specific student with specific strategies and different levels of scaffolded instruction. And so that's something that the first year that we've jumped into, just this year. Last year, what we did is to kind of just make this available to teachers as a passive resource. Hey, we're just going to become familiar with WIDA. What is it? What does it test for? Let's look at the body as a whole. Well, this year we wanted to increase our intentionality and all right, here's our data. We know who our kids are. You know which kids you have in your advisory. Now these are the strategies we're going to approach these kids with, and here's why. And so again, tying that to high effect size strategies according to what the data tells us and what would be best for our kids. And so moving more from passive to active, here's the expectation. When we teach this is how we're going to do it.
And then kind of to echo off of what Dr. Perez says and what Carlos was saying, when we look at our students and all the demographics and stuff too, many of our students are from Othello and started in kindergarten with us. So when we're looking at that data, it's about navigating the language required for college readiness, career readiness, and your grade level standards. I didn't come from an agriculture background. So my first fair here in Othello and being in the poultry barn, it was an entirely new language for me when it comes to animal science and fair and getting your kids to go show their birds and things like that. So those were words where I'm a native English speaker, but I grew up in California not showing chickens. So I had to learn all of that verbiage. And I had to learn all of those things, just like if I went into a college level course on pediatric medicine, that would require a different vocabulary. And so when we're looking at the WIDA data, it's to complement the grade level and the content standards. So we're looking at ESPA, we're looking at the science test, we're looking at their interim blocks, and we're looking at what are they doing on their scales in their classes too. And it's the English required of them, no matter what their language background is. The WIDA doesn't take the language background into consideration. It's really about, are we preparing our students to participate effectively so that they can reach grade level standards and they're college and career ready?
One more for Mr. Bullis now. With the PBIS and the ABCs and stuff, what do you recommend on the high school side to when we receive these 8th graders to kind of keep the momentum? Because it might be a little bit harder to do the store and that kind of situation for us, but I still want to keep them on that pace of you should be an achiever, look forward to school, and some kind of recognition or reward with that too.
Yeah, I think everybody that does what they're supposed to be doing and are doing their best likes to have that recognition somehow, and then somehow to reinforce it. So it's always on the forefront of their minds. When we went to Renaissance, and I went to Renaissance, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago as well, and I heard about these Ren cards again and again. And most of them are high schools that are using the Ren card. Oh. It's not the middle school. It's the high schools where most of this action is happening. So this could be easily done in the high school. I mean, it's the same model. It's what's important to you as a school. How do you recognize when the students are doing those things? What are you going to reward them? What do students value that would say, oh, maybe I could try a little harder. Maybe I can show up to school. That's going to move me up to this card and the rewards that are offered there. So that kind of thing. But you got to think about what do students want, and what middle schoolers want are different from high school students.
We do have Mr. Gonzalez going to the high school to be the culture guy, right? I mean, you're the athletic director, but aren't you also SEL
You can coin
or something?
that sounds good.
Yeah.
Miles, you're also getting a really good group of our ASB leaders.
Ethan, yes. I
that
just
are
had Ethan in
well.
paper just now.
You're getting a lot of them,
Yes.
but yes, Ethan's one of them. But those kids
They're
know,
amazing.
and they're the ones that run our ABC program. So you could actually get them, like pull them in and have them help run it and start it, maybe even if it's just with freshmen.
One of the other things, Miles, that I heard you talk about this morning, the three of you, and we've heard it a little bit here today, there's such a strong research base and connection between a student who's connected to an adult at school and their graduation rate. And you can see it anecdotally at Othello High School with the Avid family, with kids who are connected to band or to drama or to athletics. Those kids graduate. So the answer is getting more kids connected to more well-trained adults at the high school. And you have to think about systems and structures that foster that sense of connection, but that's what you should be thinking about. How do we, and you were talking about it this morning, how do we get staff to buy in and how do we get kids to buy in? So when you figure it out, let us know.
In this Renaissance conference, most of the speakers are kids.
Okay.
They're telling us how they're running the school and what they're doing to get the kids involved, to improve culture, and just getting the kids excited about being there and belonging. You know, all the kids want to belong, and it's pretty easy for some of them to just fade in the background. Well, how do you pull them in? What gets them excited?
At that Renaissance conference, sorry, just really quick, do students also attend, or is it only for adults?
There's more students than adults.
It's huge. Yeah. Lots of schools come with 10, 15 students. A lot of interwoven with the ASB leadership. They're doing activities. They're doing different assemblies and making videos. And it's just, I mean, you can go check it out. They have a lot of free stuff on their site. It's Johnson's Renaissance. We get, they have Harbor videos that, you spoke about SEL, Character Strong. So Harbor and Renaissance have videos that coincide with SEL and making those connections and building relationships with the students, conversations that can be had in the classroom in your advisory class. So it's interwoven a lot with the ASB leadership and is driven by the students, student voice.
I'm pretty sure the high school is a Renaissance school.
We get it free.
Yeah, we get it free because we use Renaissance for our yearbook, but caps and gowns for graduation, any of that, if it's through Jostens, then it's free. And all the resources that they have, whether it's character education, you know, just different ideas to improve your culture for staff, for students. There's all kinds of things on there that if you log in, you can access it just as well as anybody else.
When I was a principal at Othello High School, back in up to 2015-16, I started the grad walk because of an idea from Justin's Renaissance. And seeing kids on fire for student and staff celebration and school spirit, it was amazing to see. And I've been to a lot, you know, in my experiences over 18 years as an admin, but it's hands down probably the best experience I've had when it comes to the importance of culture and school spirit and student and staff celebrations. I mean, those kids are on fire for school spirit and celebrating people. And so tons of ideas. It's something that we've embraced over the years, and you can hear from them just the benefits of the ideas that that program offers. And Jostens is a great organization too.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for all of the hard work that you've put in. Specifically you, Carlos, thank you for years of hard work at the middle school and for all of the presentations you've given us through the years, and the impact that you've had on the middle school is timeless. So thank you so much for all of your hard work. And thank you to your team for being the best of the best. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Director Perez, do we have any public comment today? None? Okay. Moving on to upcoming events. June 6th, we have OHS and DOHS graduation at the high school at 8 p.m. June 9th, we have our next board meeting at 1. June 10th is Ludocago Dual Language Night at OHS at 6 p.m. Do you want a head count right now for like who's going to be at these different things, or do you feel like you already know, Marisa? Okay. Okay. Ludocago Dual Language Night. Zara will be there. Anybody else?
I'll probably be there.
I would just like to mention also on June 10th, I will be doing Rockets at Ludocaga too.
Oh, Rockets?
Yes.
On June 10th at Ludocaga?
Yes.
Okay. So potentially Aaron.
I'll be there.
And then June 13th is the middle school promotion at 9 a.m. I know I'm signed up to do that, but I won't be here. So who else is signed up for promotion? Aaron? Azaro, are you available? You're out of town? We might have a new board member who's available. Fingers crossed. So what that looks like is we go to promotion and to graduation and hand out the diplomas. So yeah, maybe check your schedule and let Marisa know if you're available June 13th at 9 a.m. to hand out diplomas at the promotion for the middle school. And then June 13th is also the last day of school, and June 23rd we have another board meeting. Does anyone have anything to add to that besides me? Pete, I was gonna ask you, we need to schedule our board retreat. Now that we have a full board, maybe Marisa can get us some dates that could potentially work, or I don't know where you're, if you
Yep,
already.
we'll bring you some. Is it okay to bring them on June 9th?
Perfect.
A series of options?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. Now we'll move on to the board self-assessment of the meeting.
I would just like to compliment the degree of participation from my current student directors and the questionings and the comments that they have. You bring a lot to the meeting.
Appreciate. Zara, don't interrupt me. Just kidding. No, I appreciate our new board member that she showed up and interviewed and is willing to serve. Sometimes this can be a wonderful experience, and sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult. And it's you know, it's time away from your family and time away from your hobbies and your interests. And so I deeply appreciate your willingness to make this commitment and to serve our community from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for showing up and doing that. It was a really great interview and excited to have you on board. I'm excited too. Yay.
Of course, Carlos and his team here today with the presentation from MMS.
Yep, great job. As Zaro said, a well-planned agenda. And thank you for the update on standards-based grading. I'm excited for the direction that that's taking and what that means for understanding between our parents and our kids and the staff, and hopefully moving forward with a lot of clarity. So thank you for that. And I know that Dr. Meek plays a huge role in that too, so thank you for all of your time that you put into that, Dr. Meek. Anything else? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.